Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe show. If you thought the last couple of days was going to keep me down, you were wrong. I'm still here. But today is a much more chill day. CCP is going to take the brunt of the day's interviews for me. I appreciate that. But we're going to start today off with Teddy, and then we're going to raid on over to CCP. And we'll have all of the CCP stuff, and sometime later after that, we will get things together for. I have one more interview. I think me and Mike Azariah and I are probably going to have an interview later today. So, but for now, we're going to get started with Teddy's. Teddy, say something so that way they can all hear you.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Yay, all the sound is right. Yay. Oh. Yes. And
It's all good. Everything always goes wrong when you need it.
well, I like to say that there's always one thing, so it's just about figuring out what's the one thing that went wrong, right?
Yeah, it happens. It's no biggie.
Do you have any questions or anything?
What about sort of the interview process in general, or just something to kick us off?
You know the format and everything. Any questions before I start?
Nah. Right. Let's get going.
Excellent. Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show's CSM 16 coverage, coming at you with interview with Teddy Gbyc from Foxholders. First of all, how you doing?
I'm doing good, mate. I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing good. This has been an awesome process, and I'm learning a lot, and I can't wait to jump into this new interview as well. So, as always, I begin by explaining the rules. I have the candidate and their platform in front of me on their forum post, and I will spend 50 minutes exploring their candidacy with them in order to figure out the best way to understand, appreciate, or how my audience may want to vote for them. And after that, I give them a 10-minute warning in which they have an opportunity to say whatever they want in order, maybe I missed something or a final pitch. And then if we're both satisfied, then it gets sent over to YouTube with all of the others into a giant playlist so that you guys can watch them all to make a good decision about who you need to support in order to represent you to CCP, because that's what this is all about. The CSM is an incredibly important tool that we have, and it is only as useful to us as we take it seriously. So, with all that being said, let's jump into this. Teddy, what is your history with the CSM? Is this your first run?
No, I actually ran 2 years ago. Sort of semi-gave up halfway through, and instead threw my support behind Gbyc, who then won that round.
I'm tempted to ask how you feel about that decision.
Positive, really. I don't know how many votes sort of I shifted towards him, but any sort of thought that I might have helped get him in was pretty positive, because at the end of the day, it's just a wormhole getting on that matters, really.
That's true. And that is a very good point, and that's something that we're going to really look into as we go through this, I'm sure. But okay, so you ran a few years ago. Now you're running again. Did you not run last year?
No. My life was just way too busy.
Got it.
And with everything that was happening in both like Eve and Out of Eve, I just didn't feel like I had the time.
That makes sense. What? Why? No, stop. All right. Okay. So first things first, obviously you are a wormholer candidate then. In fact, you are, as you said before, you ran before, and you come from a pretty well-known institution, both then and now, foxholers. So why don't you kind of introduce us to you then, in that sense, and to your organization a little bit.
Sure. If you go sort of all the way back, I sort of did a long stint in Norsec in Providence in a small indie corp. Eventually, just sort of got bored of that and thought about Wormhole Space. Then moved into a corp called Shekel Squad, which later became Interwhole Revenue Service. And then from there, made my own corp, or took over a corp called Sinister Trajectory. Ran that for a couple of years before eventually merging into Foxholers with my fiance.
Right. And just to get this out of the way, your fiance, who is also pretty well known.
Yeah, she's decently well known. Ashley Trainer, the author of the Ash in Space blog.
Right. And she is one of those absolute towering legends of the community. And I guess if nothing else, the fact that she chose you as a spouse kind of speaks highly of your character, I suppose. But I think that actually brings up a really good point, which is I've talked about this to all of the other wormholers, and I will continue to talk about this to all of the wormholers, which is that, like, for a few years, like after nullsecers really took over the CSM, like CSM 5 and 6 and beyond, eventually the wormholers realized that they needed representation, but in order to get representation, they had to all come under, go behind one person. So they had primaries, and they were able to pick like one guy, and then wormholers actually had a disproportionately success at being able to get their own representatives elected, given their population, in a way that us faction warfare people were like super jelly of for like many, many years. But eventually that kind of decayed and resulted in what I've been calling the Great Betrayal a couple of years ago, which really fragmented the belief or the ability for a candidate to pull together the wormhole vote really cohesively since then. So the question that I pose to you is, why are you, of the six, I think there's like 6 different candidates running right now, which shows a high, or maybe even more, given other people with wormhole interests, but given the high interest in getting attention on wormhole space and the obviousness of the lack of CSM coverage in like the last year, for example, why are you the one that should be rallied behind? Because with 6 people, that's that you risk fragmenting the vote really badly, and then having none of you get elected. So with each one of you, like by running, you are in essence saying that there's a reason why you need to be the person more than other people. So why are you the person that everyone should rally behind?
There's a couple of key points in there. That sort of first, like, why should everyone sort of rally behind me? I've worked with pretty much every single like big and small to medium-sized corp over the last 5 years that's had any sort of like interest in working with other people. Most of the sort of leadership of a lot of the other bigger corps have either been in a corp that I've been in, or we've done ops together. And a lot of it is sort of based on trust. Wormhole Space is so tribal.
Right.
You need someone like everyone trusts, and it's not even about sort of mechanical knowledge, but more that this person isn't just going to turn around and either use being in the CSM to their advantage, or to somehow play the system.
Right. And I compared it to faction warfare, not by accident, because it's kind of the same problem, right? Where it's like, it's hard to, it's hard for a Galente faction warfare guy to convince a Caldari faction warfare guy that I will represent you, given there might be some fact of the war zone that is currently giving the Galente an advantage over the Caldari. And so it may even just be good game design. But as a Galente person, I would represent like the Galente perspective of that feature. What is and isn't a problem, what is or isn't good gameplay, as it were. And so, there's been very few times that faction warfare have been able to pull together a representative. But the thing that happens, the way you do it, if at all, is to understand that there are issues that transcend side, right? That we can all agree, regardless of what's happening, that there are things that we can agree on. And once you get to that point, that's when you start being able to have those kinds of coalitions. So that's what I'm saying. Like, can you convince your enemy that you're not going to, use the CSM either as intelligence or just mechanical weight behind arguments and stuff like that in order to make changes that favors your group over others, knowing that there are people that would be the others in that calculation.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. In truth, we don't really, like as a corporal, me, sort of strive to try and use that sort of stuff to our advantage.
Right. Yeah.
We kind of take pride in our sort of like mediocrity. We're not really the best at anything, but we like to give stuff a go. But then the second point, if we go back a bit, why there's so many people running, I think it sort of points to the key issue that there's a lot of things that are wrong with Wormhole space at the moment. There's a lot of criticism of like the amount of blue loot that's coming out of Wormhole space, and it's gotten to the point where a lot of people think that they can be the one to sort of stand for them and address these problems,
right,
and try and bring them to light to CCP.
Exactly.
I think that's me. So that's pretty much why the reason I stood.
That's a really good answer. I do. So, like, I'm not the most well versed in Wormhole space, but I will say that, like, while Foxholers is a storied, or like I guess, well known Wormhole organization, they are not well known for bad reasons in the same way that a lot of other Wormhole corps may be. Even mixed reasons. They may not stand out in like chuckle kind of ways like Wingspan, but like I don't know if I've heard anything bad about Foxholers, and I've certainly heard good things about Foxholers. And of course, Ashy is great, and you are great. So I'm sure that means that you guys are exemplars of Wormhole life, and that would help because again, the thing is that like it is trust, right? Everybody needs to be able to say that you are when the doors close and CCP is talking to you about what wormholes are like, that the words come out of your mouth will support them too, right? That's what this is all about. So let's get to those issues. You bring up surgical strike straight and foremost. This is one of the biggest things. I'm just going to hand it to you and let you talk on the issue.
Oh God, I don't know if the stream's long enough. Yes,
I mean, like, don't explain the problem, but like what is? I guess the biggest thing is like high level. What is the problem with what problems does it create now, and what needs to be addressed most?
Sure. So, surgical strike in the patch just before the limited fax cap boosters to 1, like extra large. That effectively killed Apex heavy armor in high class space. So this would be when you had two C5 corps who would connect. They would throw 3 caps at each other with loads of T3s and support,
Right.
and they would just brawl it out. After that, after the surgical strike, obviously with hams doing more damage and T3s losing resists, faxes just couldn't keep them up anymore. So things would just, like, the shacks would just spool up on a T3. A couple of minutes later, it would just die. There's nothing you could do about it. So that effectively kills brawling, which is like our main pastime in Wormhole space. It's one of the reasons why we live here.
Yeah. So actually, I will explain just a little bit about that for context. So Surgical Strike had some big changes to it, but it was also part of another change that was ongoing at the same time, and they coalesced to kind of make one, big change to the way that fighting works, all told. So what Surgical Strike was all about was making short range ammo do more damage, or short range weapon, short range ammo do more damage, buffing to strategy, like more brawly strategies, right? But it was about that same time, and as part of that they were doing the tiericide of resist modules, and when it hit tank, all of the resist modules went down basically a grade effectively, which meant that you could never get as high as X type again. And if you had a T2, or if you had a faction, it'd be almost the equivalent of like a T2 now, et cetera, et cetera. So everything's resistance went down, and everything's close range damage went up, and this significantly changed how fights worked.
Yeah, I mean, it completely changed the meta. A lot of people then either switched to command ships, so damnations, or went down a class, and a lot of people brawl now in sacrileges, just because they're cheap and everyone can just sort of throw them away at each other.
But has the Wormhole community adapted at all to this, or like what needs to happen now? Because those are very broad changes that you could say that Wormhole space, lost in those changes, as it were, were the losers of those changes. But that's an Eve-wide change, and therefore, if you were to fix it, that would also be an Eve-wide change. So, assuming that you kind of want to avoid that when possible, and also you don't want to add more like technical debt or requirement of dev cycles to fix something if you can avoid it, what do we do now?
It's one of those things where I think Wormhole space was just the collateral damage again. Where we just have to sort of take it and maybe try and get at some point a rebalance to resists or to some of the damage to try and bring brawling back in any way. Because a lot of people have just adapted by just not doing it anymore. It was also coupled by the Wormholes with Love patch a couple of months beforehand.
Yes.
Which also removed the ability for you to roll holes very quickly. With C5 space, you would put a cap out with your prop mod hot, you would jump and then activate your prop mod. So it puts your prop mod's mass onto the Wormhole as well.
Right.
Which meant you could roll in one pass. So you could go in and out hot and it would roll.
Right. So this is very important because recently there is a second change. And a lot of people, I don't remember who I asked, but I asked somebody and how much this is like fixed the problem. And they said that it pretty much fixed the problem, but that just allowed a higher amount of mass. Like it makes it so you can have your battle cruisers plated again. But what this was that you could actually put something into a wormhole and then make it bigger, because the reason why this got fixed was that it was a bug. Basically, the wormhole checked what mass you were at the beginning of the jump and then calculated your mass versus its total mass jump through it at the end of the jump. And so wormholers got super clever and got good at activating the micro warp drive as they're jumping through the wormhole, so that way they can go through in a ship that wouldn't be able to go through with a micro warp drive on because its mass is so big, but now can, and then balloon its mass, have that ballooned mass be the mass that's taken out. So they could actually roll a wormhole's mass with far fewer passes than you could otherwise. Even now, with the making it so that battle cruisers can have plates, you still can't activate the micro warp drive to get something even bigger, if that makes sense.
No, however, they have changed capital size connections, so you can now use a capital to roll, which is, they've changed it sort of, so they haven't re-enabled the bug, but they have allowed you to sort of re-enable like capital rolling. So before, you used to be able to roll every sort of like 90 seconds. After the bug was fixed, it was every like sort of 3 minutes, and now it's back to about 90 seconds again.
It's funny because this reminds me of faction warfare, because there was a bug that made it so that you could, well, not a bug, but you could basically, whatever, you could get into a complex without anyone being able to lock you, because you could activate the gate
sliding.
Yeah, gate sliding. They removed gate sliding from the game, and everybody freaked out. And long enough that CCP had to fix it, and so, but they couldn't reintroduce the bug. Because now there's an extra check, and so it takes an extra tick, and that's why it now is this way. So what they had to do is balloon the radius of the gate, because they were like, what's the real problem? The real problem is that if somebody wants to catch me on a gate, they can. So they made it so that the radius of the activation is way bigger. So even if there's somebody hunting, you can usually land like way off and still activate and get in. In the same way here, they can't reintroduce that particular nuance, so instead they tweak it in other ways.
Yeah, it's these little bugs that really sort of highlight why you need like a Wormhole CSM, why you need faction warfare CSM, just to show CCP this is the deeper meaning of these changes, where you have the knowledge of the mechanics that go beyond sort of like a base level.
And it needs to be a CSM representative, because the problem with feedback is that when the players say like, you got rid of this change, it's ruining everything, CCP hears we relied on a bug, or whatever it is that's making it so that they don't work it out. The point is that it actually requires a back and forth, right? This is why a lot of CSM guys say it's not about the meetings, it's about like drinking a beer afterwards, because there's a lot of assumptions, and the positions are there, and CCP maybe even feels like they understand the situation, but it isn't until you can really sit there and go back and forth where you can like work out those false assumptions and really let people understand, and maybe even understand for yourself, what about this change is the part that was the loss, and what about this change was the part that CCP was targeting. To that end, I'd almost like to see a CCP or a CSM representative that is going, especially one that's going to go for wormholers, to actually be interested, or not to actually, but to be interested in like following up on Surgical Strike altogether, because I think it would not be difficult to challenge the assumption that Surgical Strike was successful. And I would actually ask CCP as a CSM member to show what they were trying to achieve with Surgical Strike and why they feel it was successful. And if it wasn't, iterate on it, because it's not just you. There's a lot of groups that are upset about Surgical Strike. And I think that it would be very easy to rally a lot of communities if you could show that it didn't do anything.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of the changes had sort of the opposite
good
effect. Yeah, but the buffs to hams and stuff like that. The sort of intended change from my reading of it was they wanted to encourage brawling, but by giving brawling class weapons much higher damage, it pushes everyone out to Kaiti. because no one wants to get into range of hams or sit on top of a Vindicator. So everyone just sits even further away now. So it would be nice to sort of try and challenge what they wanted from that patch, and maybe even try and get like a secondary patch on top of it to maybe even tone down some of it. Like battleships are so much more expensive now after scarcity that it may not even be needed anymore to try and force more things to die with what this patch was designed for.
Right. Also, I guess like one of the things about this last few years really and the way that CCP's development has changed is that they have embraced the chaos in a certain way where, you know, the issue with revealing to things early is that, yes, it allows us to digest things and make sure that we can work out any bugs or anything like that. But if your goal is to make a space simulation game where space is like mysterious and like spooky and in the sense that anything can happen, having to have a roadmap of every feature that's going to come out for the next 3 years kind of like goes against that notion. And so to that end, there have been a lot of they've tightened in communication, both in general and to the CSM. Now, normally we have awesome things like FanFest and eVegas that represent opportunities for us to like get together and talk about the last year, the last good pat, you know, and one of the things that we often do, or they do, is discuss, you know, the last expansion, the design goals and objectives, you know, the art, all these kinds of things. Let's just break things down and then break things down about like whatever the next thing that they revealed is and all that kind of stuff. And without those events last year and now, we haven't had that. They've been doing more stuff on Twitch, and we have seen like firesides and stuff like that, but not nearly to the amount of like devs sitting down and actually explaining after the fact what things were. And we're now a year away from things like from Wormholes with Love and from Surgical Strike and all that stuff. And it would be really nice to see CCP or the CSM, like especially in this next summit and this next year, start to go back to that stuff and say, it was cool that you didn't tell us then. We need to talk now because we personally think that you need to iterate on it. So, you know.
Yeah, like it would be amazing to have some like postmortems, even ones where we could even try and bring some data. Like we have graphs that show that like dreads went from 50 being killed a month to about 5 a month from these 2 patches. Same with faxes. They've completely dropped off a cliff. So it would be really nice to try and get like a post-mortem or even just try and understand their explanations and their intentions behind this patch or series of patches. Just so when they speak about that sort of stuff and next time, we know what to expect.
Right. So is this your first time running for CSM?
No.
No. Did I already ask that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. I just wanted to make sure. I've so many at this point. Okay. So, but I made it to the why are you applying to the CSM section. And I think that this is one of the things that's really important is that like you are very accessible within the Wormhole community. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I've got Twitter. You can find us on. We have like Discord. It's open. Anyone can join and sort of just at me, and ask questions. Pretty much on in game every day. And send me mails, that sort of stuff. And pretty much everywhere. I'm staff on TAS, so you can also reach me there. Pretty much everywhere.
Right. And you do frequently contribute information and whatnot to TIS as well, into the conversation.
Yeah, and we've outside of TAS, a couple of other wormholers and myself have started a wormhole specific podcast called Bonus Wave.
Nice.
Just to try and actually do sort of more of an open comm style discussion about certain issues with wormhole space. just so if one of us gets in, or if a wormhole CSM gets in, they can use that as a reference point.
I do find that podcasts and streams and whatnot are really good, like rallying points for communities, especially if they're on Twitch or whatever, because that way people can come. It almost becomes like a town hall at the same time. All right, so what do you feel is the value and purpose of Wormhole Space, the EVE Online?
I think it's sort of the last bastion of true small gang PvP, like less than 100 v 100. With the enforcement of mass limits, like you can't just stick 1,000 Feroxes or like just as many caps as you want through a wormhole and fight someone. It forces you to think, and it forces you to design comps around wormhole mass and specific styles. And it's also one of the only places you can realistically brawl. Everyone's sort of styled around sitting on top of each other, and one person comes out alive, which to me is sort of amazing. I left Nullsec because I was really bored of everyone sitting at 250 kilometers just pressing F1 and seeing things die. I wanted to feel like I was actually doing something. So now being part of like a 30-man fleet where you're the person to get tackled on something, or you're the person in the Balgorn to nuke and destroy the cap chain. To me, those things are way more important than like kicking goons out.
Sure, I understand that completely. And I will say that you know, when I ask this question, what is the purpose and value of such and such? What I often try to look at is like what makes those things unique, because that's the reason, that's what makes them special. And as you noted, mass limits. I like to liken it to points in like Warhammer. I've heard it done. So,
or even in the AT, if you look at sort of like AT comps.
There you go. Because, you know, you can only have so many battleships or so many battle cruisers or so many, you know, whatever. And if you look at the old like Clarion Call, and they're talking about like their one fax is their or not, well, what would be a fax now was their capital or whatever. And so I think that the fact that there's a place in space that naturally creates that is super valuable. You're right. That is one of the principal unique values of Wormhole Space. But why brawling? Why is that A, so special, and B, I mean, like, I hate to compare it again, but faction warfare also has some pretty good brawling situations. So like what makes brawling in Wormhole Space so special? Why is, because that's the part that gets also affected the most by surgical strike. So what is lost in the lack of brawling in all of this?
I think it's more just the mentality of Wormhole Space. It's always been the place where you go and brawl, and for a lot of us to lose it over the last year or so, there's been sort of a massive sort of mentality hit to us. Like it's almost been like we just had our playstyle taken away, and then being told like, well, you should be happy because hams now deal 15% more DPS, when no one wants to fight because everyone just dies. But yeah, like Losec does have brawling, but it also has Cynos, and everyone can bring as many caps as they want.
I said faction warfare, so like sites, like complexes, but that is very limited in like the tech of ships, obviously.
Sure, yeah, that's fair.
But my point is that one of the reasons why I like faction, I hate, this is not about faction warfare, but so you know, when somebody lands, you know where they're going to land, and so you can set up better brawling situations. Which this is my, I guess, bringing it back to wormholes. When I've asked before about wormholes and brawling, because this is, you know, before all of this, I asked about this when people were telling me about how good it was in Wormhole Space, is that like the wormhole is what really creates this brawling scenario, because of the fact that there is no aggression mechanic, but there is polarization, means that the fight ends up like right on the wormhole more often than not, and therefore you're at 0, and therefore people get to like slug it out really good. So if people have moved to kiting, just try to help me understand, as somebody who hasn't been in wormholes for the last year, how does that transition? Like, how does a kite fight even? How do fights play out nowadays? If that was the way that they used to play out.
You can still get the brawling fights, but they are usually without caps now, because they just die to any sort of mass fleet. You can't really get self-tanked phoenixes or anything to tank the numbers that a lot of corps can bring out anymore.
Is that a surgical strike issue, or is that a Gbyc issue?
It's more of a Leshak and a surgical strike issue.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that was one of the main sort of issues. And then you have obviously like with the Leshaks now, they do a ton of DPS. So like, if you know you can't tank them, you don't want to get anywhere near them.
Right.
A lot of people want to kite, and a lot of people just don't want to fight. If you form like a massive fleet on their hull, they may just roll it off, try and roll you out, or maybe even just bring like a token comp of like Drakes or Drake navies and just brawl you for a little while, die, and then ask to roll off.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and so how popular is, like, because I always see like Gbyc comps all over the place. Is that continued to remain true?
They are insanely used. One of the guys in Praise Bob actually ran the numbers for the last year, or since the Dbyc came out, and it currently sits at about 50% of the total battlecruiser usage across Wormhole space.
Wow.
So it's insanely used. It's kind of like the perfect wormhole ship for small to mid-scale comps. It has remote reps, it has newts, it's decently fast, and it's decently tanky, and it's easily multi-boxable.
So a little while ago, the Gbyc and Leshak were nerfed, quote unquote, by increasing their points, and by that I mean their mass, such that it was you could take less of them through the wormhole. This is partially because like Triglavian ships, among other things, are like, I think, the second smallest mass for their size category, second only to like the Sisters of Eve ships, which are literally designed to be needles to go through wormholes. So the Leshak was absurdly small before they beefed it up a little bit to make it so they're a little bit harder to get through wormholes. Do you feel like that fix was correct? Is it not enough? How are Triglavian ships in the balance at this point?
I still think they do way too much damage. I think they need a little bit of their power, like curtailing. But that could also be done in some other ways, maybe through the utility. The Shaks, I think, have too many high slots for their like ability and their bonuses. Drekavacs, they can't really tank in sort of higher scale fleets, so it's less of a problem. But they are monsters for the sort of mid scale, and basically dominate the meta for that sort of part. They're also maybe like shooting myself in the foot, but it's our main comp, so trying to decide, like trying to be like neutral and balanced on it is difficult.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good, going back to that, why should people vote for you? You're literally campaigning, or you're saying that your strategy should be looked at, which, if you think about it, makes sense, because you can admit that something is overpowered and therefore feel like you're being forced to use it because it's the apex strategy, and therefore using anything else feels like one hand behind your back, and therefore also want to go to CCP and say, please stop making me have to do this all the time by making it that much better than everything else in these ways, or this oppressive. Is that about right?
Yeah, they just they dominate the meta. Um, it's just too much. There needs to be some more variety brought back into Wormhole space.
And that goes back to the whole thing about unifying the wormhole vote, which is and having issues that transcend side, because it's often joke that wormhole space like was the unintended space. CCP never intended people to live there. They didn't think it was going to happen. They only didn't prevent it because they never thought that people would actually go through the effort to do it. And yet here we are. Now that was, of course, before structures, so it's significantly easier now. But my point is that they've never truly understood the design space there as well as the people that lived there. So, and this is one of the reasons why wormholers really desperately need representatives. So
I don't think that anyone has never lived in wormhole space will ever sort of truly understand the mentality behind wormholers. It's such like an insular and tribal community that it completely changes sort of your mentality on an outlook.
right, and to that end, tribal in the fact that like there's infighting, but there's also like a certain amount of, if not honor, at least shared understandings, right? So like you know that something is making like you all kind of know why you're in wormhole space and what makes it fun. So you can agree about what's making it less fun, even when one side is using it better than the other or whatever. You can still call it BS because either way, on the one hand, you're in it to win it, but on the other hand, you're also in wormhole space to have fun doing it. And if they've gotten rid of the fun doing it, then what good is winning?
Yeah, exactly that. And also, if you look on the forum thread that you've got up, point one, the mass roaching fleets, pretty
Yes.
much everyone's agreed about this. It's a massive problem, and wormhole space is pretty much united against it because a lot of times it's not even wormholers that are doing it. There's been a massive increase since the war started in Norsec of roaching in wormhole space.
Right. But
and we're all desperately afraid of this way that CCP is going to try and address this without a wormhole or CSM.
okay. So yeah, I want to explore that because this is something I've asked about and I want to definitely get your take on. So I'm not a wormholer. This not a wormholer, by the way. Like basically to shortly go after it, these roaching fleets are battleships that go and do high class wormholes, and through hook and by crook, they're able to do these sites in ways that allow them to harvest it in ridiculous quantities. And when you do catch them, if you can, they can minimize their losses to a single ship that is relatively cheap in comparison. This has allowed one or two individual or small groups to make an incredible amount of money in a short period of time, which is also shown up on things like the MER. Help me understand as a non-wormholer, like there are lots and lots of wormholes out there. Like this guy has just like when Azuki, I think it was Azuki, got FOF missiles nerfed. That was because they sat outside of the target range of the sleepers. They were undermining the site themselves in order to make their money. Every step of the way on this just seems like a guy who has solved the problems and are executing it correctly in a clever way. And there's lots of there are lots of little ways in Eve that if you take something to its absolute extreme at the correct time, you can just make an absolute amount of money from them. And you know they are noteworthy, but at the same time, like it's just that dude's ISK. So why is this so harmful to wormholes that it has freaked out the wormhole community to make an issue of it? Is this not just a bunch of wormholers hating on the guy who's got it all solved that they can't figure out how to kill him?
The main sort of hate is that a lot of them aren't wormholers that are making this money. The ISK isn't staying in wormhole space. It's not being used to PvP. It's going out to K-space and then either being used in Norsec or even potentially like RMT, because Blue Loot is quite vulnerable to RMT.
But like, isn't that like an in-game issue? Like, is that a CSM issue? Like the economics nullsec harvesting stuff from Wormhole space because they feel like that's an in-game emergent event. And RMT, like that's a different kind of accusation. So what kind
It
of harm
is.
is it to Wormhole space in general, though, like to the
The,
wormholers?
the issue is that it's sort of exposed a farming method that completely skews the risk versus reward of these sites. These sites were redone back in Citadel expansion, and they were designed back then for the ships of that time. So that main farming ships back then were Nesters and rattlesnakes.
Right.
They had nowhere near as much DPS as these Leshak balls. So most people use dreads to clear them. However, now after the Marauder changes, now after the Leshaks have come out and become cheap, you can run sites almost as fast as a dread, if not faster, for way less investment and way less risk. If someone's tackled and you, like in the site, and you see a new SIG pop up, you can literally kick that person from fleet and take a potch from filament, and
Right.
your entire fleet's safe. Now, technically, that's all allowed within the game rules, but to me, that harms the risk versus reward of that space.
Right. But at the same time, a lot of those steps are what I think could be easily argued as clever use of game mechanics, right? So as a CSM person who is going to be the person that is advocating this for Wormhole space and trying to figure out the solution, like what step in that process, where is the violation of it? Is it just simply that you can use Potion filaments while in the middle of a PvE site? Is it like where do we fix the problem?
There's a few things and a few different ways that you could probably fix it. The main sort of the simplest one that has sort of been groupthinked by Wormhole space is to get the AI to spread scrams.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, the AI in Wormhole space is pretty old.
Right.
So it targets one person, and all of the sleepers that have scrams scram that one person. Whereas if you had them scram everything in sight, none of those people could leave until they've killed those scrams.
Right. That's actually a really good point. Oh, sorry.
That might just change the way that they kill sites, but it leaves them vulnerable for a period during that site, which at that point they are at risk of being ganked.
So that actually brought up a really good point in my head, or reminded me of something, which is that like the AI has gone through a lot of revisions, and the sleeper AI in particular, while was new when it came out, was actually one of the like it was a major upgrade of the original mission rats, effectively. But in a lot of ways, it was only really upgraded by increasing, upping up the numbers, making it omni, giving them all the different E-war types or like stuff to mess with people, just making it super dangerous. It wasn't until later with the Drifter AI that you started seeing like Diamond Rats and Decision Tree AI, which leads into the Invasion AI, which now everything past that with like events and stuff, those can be neuted. They respond to tracking disruption, all that kind of stuff, which has made invasions and events far more interesting PvE content since then. And while there have been some cries to like go back and put them into missions, one of the issues with that is that mission running, one of the values of it to mission runners is its consistency, right? And so CCP has even said in the past that they're very reluctant to like go back and just, augment the mission rats to make them too much more less predictable or disrupt these kinds of things, because that would actually disrupt the core value of mission running within the ecosystem of Eve. Sleeper space, Wormhole space, upgrading the sleeper AI to the modern AI and making them significantly smarter, nastier, and try to like mess with people in different ways. I think that do you think that that would be that would receive a positive response from Wormhole community? And do you think that that would be a part of the solution?
I think if it achieved the intended goal of increasing the risk, then yeah, a lot of us are pretty bored with these sites now. We've done thousands of them over the years. The AI, all of the sites are completely thought out.
Right.
There's literally spreadsheets of this is how much this wave does, this is what it nukes for, this is its alpha. So you can basically just use this spreadsheet, use a separate guide with a fit, and just walk into a site. So having AI that actually makes you think would make it so much more engaging.
I agree. But as I just mentioned with mission runners, because missions have been that way for so long, people have kind of expected it to be that way. When the Triglavians, when Chapter 3 ended and Poshvin occurred, and so the new wormholes started happening and Triglavians started coming out, what I heard from null people, or sorry, what I heard from wormholers were the same kind of thing that I heard during the Drifter attacks in nullsec, which is like, you know, non-consensual PvE. I'm here, you know, I want to do my thing, and these things are getting in the way of me doing my thing. I need to do these things. And I tried several times to convince people that it's like, you know, wormholes are all about what's going on right now. And what's going on right now is the trigs are connected, and that's a different content with different opportunities. And they really seemed resistant to that. And I bring that up to ask, like, do you really think that, or do you think that there might be a risk that if you did make C5, C6 wormholes sites in particular, like super, like less predictable as a way of making them riskier, that there would be backlash about that? Or would you think that that's actually a good thing and a sign that wormhole space might actually heal?
I think it would be good. It would make it
That's
more
what we need.
engaging. People would need to sort of rethink about how they do the sites. We may even start bringing people to actually form fleets to do these sites. A lot of us just run these on our own or with like one or two people. But if you actually have to like form like almost a PvP fleet to do these sites, if the risk and the reward is, or if the reward is equal to the risk and the sort of difficulty of the site, and we have to form a fleet to do it, that's so much more fun. It's more engaging, and it can even sort of help train even like junior FCs or just basic fleet command.
Right. And while it might be tricky in sleeper space due to like the blue loot and everything, one of the things that is true is that like they've been experimenting with some better ways of making sure that the reward feels good for fleets as well as individuals. Things like a bit or invasion sites paying out a maximum amount. So if you don't bring at least the minimum number of people into the site, you just are leaving ISK on the table. Or like actually the resource wars right now, when you're done, when the resource wars is completed, everybody who contributed gets paid out based on the success, not based on how many people are in the site. So, you know, if it's a 7-man site and you do it with 3 people, then that was just 4 payouts that you didn't get.
Yeah, you could even use the same sort of spawn mechanics for the high sec FOBs, where it spawns different things based on what you bring in.
Yeah, so I was thinking that you could have dynamically, like almost like capital escalations are in a way, but like the site will dynamically respond to how much of a fleet comes in.
Yeah, it would be amazing, I think, to have that sort of stuff. Realistically, we're more sort of looking towards just trying to keep stuff semi the same and then just fixing the broken, really. I think that's what we can try and achieve this year, if we sort of look at what the CSM does realistically. But like on a long term, that sort of stuff would be amazing.
Right. Well, and on the subject of kind of revitalizing the sleepers and the sites themselves, have you ever put any time or interest in kind of the puzzle box side of Anoikis? The fact that like when Wormhole Space was first created, there's all sorts of like all the sites mean something, all the words mean something. There's triggers. You can go back to the Eric Jalan project and CCP Drop Bear's whole thing about how he said every pen stroke matters. I personally believe that if we want to make Wormhole's Place interesting and like revamp those sites and stuff like that, part of that should be rekindling that interest in the pieces that are there for us to put together and what it all means. How much of that side of Wormhole Space have you gotten into at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's so so many threads of like sleeper lore that could be explored, and so much. This like the Drifter storyline is still sort of open and could be explored further. I think it would be amazing, because I think it's just such a cool sort of storyline, like the sleepers and everything to do with like Caroline Starr and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
So I will say this: I've asked that of a lot of wormholers so far, and I will ask more. There, if you pay attention, or as I've been paying attention to CCP and the development of things and stuff, a lot of people like to say that the Drifter storyline has been abandoned or whatever. But the issue is that one of the latest major events was the formation of Poshvin, and guess what? There's new Drifter stuff there. So the Drifter story is anywhere from but Left Behind. But one of the things that I keep noting is the fact that the next logical step is Anoinkus. And so like that's why it's one of the reasons why I ask these questions about like the revamping of the PvE sites and and dynamic PvE and disruptive PvE in Wormhole Space, because it would seem to me that the Triglavians, now that they have a foothold in K-Space, are perhaps interested in taking their fight to their ancient enemy, Azdaja, which would make that the plot. And of all of this, the wormholers that I've asked so far, that series of questions, I mean, I'll be honest with you, like I've yet to meet a wormholer that lives in Wormhole Space, runs wormhole sites, and has been like, yeah, I'm totally into all that stuff. Like nobody even pays attention to the stuff that's in there. And it's kind of my pet peeve. So knowing that your response is by far the most like, if what I just said is true, and that is what CCP is doing, then it is very likely that you will be a very good candidate to be the person there helping them deal with this. Because if a candidate is maybe more, non-consensual PvE is bad, whatever, they may just end up arguing or being disruptive of the change that CCP has in mind. Whereas somebody who is more embracive of an engaging and interesting and unpredictable wormhole space will, like our buddy here, will advocate for it.
Yeah, I think the lore for Wormhole Space, I think, is critically underrated.
I agree. I strongly agree.
There's so many storylines and stuff that could be explored. Because like there's so many different, even if you look into sort of the relic sites of sleepers, you've got all like Talak and Rex and stuff like that. There's just so much stuff to explore with it.
Yeah, and the issue is that it's there to be explored already. That is, when it comes to that stuff, it's not even a matter of waiting for CCP. If anybody who's listening to this and are confused about what I'm saying, go check out the Eric Jalan project and see what happened there. And there is like every name of every site, the descriptions of things, like there's stuff going on, and it's designed to be a mystery to solve. And while Templar 1 gave us big pieces of that mystery, I believe that there's still a lot more that we can learn from it, and it directly applies to Triglavians, Drifters, and everything in the modern day. Anywho, thanks for going on that little tangent with me. And I think that, honestly, this kind of covers this question. Oh, wow, I just realized that, good. I was just thinking to myself, I'm kind of running low on questions, or where should I go? And then I just realized that it is 10-minute warning time. So that solves that problem for me. But before I do want to also point out that Ashy here, again, active member of the community. If you went to the Eve Academy website, which you have not, I recommend you do. Experienced or inexperienced players, if you've ever played Eve, go to Eve Academy, check it out. If for no other reason, you'll know about it and be able to share it with your new bro friends. But Ashy worked very, very hard, along with CSP Aurora and a couple others for getting it together. And it is an incredible resource, and they're continuing to build on it. So that is Ashy. And she says that this dude that we're talking to right here is a good guy. So apparently her husband's a good guy. No, you're 10-minute. Hello?
I think you cut out for a second, sorry.
Oh, it is your 10-minute warning. Yeah,
Cool.
you can.
So,
Oh, sorry. Go on.
what was you going to say? Sorry.
Sorry, in chat, somebody was asking if they could link the site, and for a second, I answered there instead of typing it. So go on.
But yeah, if you go back to that the Academy page, it's really good. Even if you've never like explored like industry or something, it gives really good like rundowns on what to do. It gives you steps on how to do it, even skill plans and fits and stuff like that. It's really, really well put in. I think it sort of points to some of the really nice things that CCP is doing for the MPE this year. I think they're sort of focusing on that this year from everything I've heard from them.
Yep.
I think that's really, I think, what's important really. The EVE lives and dies by new players. It's the only way we're going to keep going, keep enjoying this brilliant game. So, and then, yeah, it's great.
That does remind me, however, that I did forget to reveal my conflicts of interest at the beginning of the video. I apologize. I knew I was going to mess something up. That happened to be what it was. But no, obviously you and I have talked on talking stations and whatnot before, and Ashley was kind enough to recommend, or not, I mean, EVE Academy was nice enough to recommend my organization quite a few times on this website. So I guess take that into account when I tell you that this website is awesome and that everybody should go to it all the time, every time, and follow all of its recommendations, especially the ones that say to go to my wiki and join my corp. I mean, what? Hi.
Foxholers is also mentioned on there, so I'm also totally not biased.
So, but what this shows to me is that, you are like EVE resonates in your entire life, right? Like this is not just something that you play. This is something that like it's in your home life, it's in your free time, and it makes total sense that you're going to want to be running for CSM. And I think that that also gives a strong reason for why, as I said, one may want to rally behind you as a candidate, and why, especially somebody who might not live in Wormhole space. I like to say this because like maybe there's a high secker or even a null block guy who, they put up their top person as their #1 spot, but then, they know and they've understood by watching these videos how important that Wormhole space is. And so they want to give at least a vote to a Wormhole representative. You would be, I think that there's a pretty good argument for you to be the Wormhole representative for the non-Wormholers as well. So yeah, any other final thoughts though?
I'm also going to try and pressure them to bring back the AT because I desperately miss playing in it.
You know what? That moves the needle for me too. Like, the thing is that like, especially with hires like CCP Aurora, and CCP Swift, like, it feels like it's gotta be close, if not there. It just takes a little bit more momentum. It just takes a little bit more pressure, or it's already ready. One of the two. But like it can't be that far of a push to get there from where we're at now. Rick?
Yeah, with the success of like the Anger Games and the less than 10, the Event tournament and stuff last year, I think it's got to be close. I just can't wait to fly a Badger again in the AT.
Well, man, I really do appreciate you coming by and chatting and talking about this, and I appreciate you running and what you do for the community and for your group. And I wish you and your wife the best of luck, or having a good time. And I wish you the best of luck on your candidacy. And I think that you'd be really awesome on the CSM, to be honest. And I look forward to talking to you either way soon enough, probably.
It's been a pleasure. Vote Teddy and vote Rix.
There you go. Excellent. All right, 07.